In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit is one. Amen. Christ is risen, trampling down death by death upon those in the tombs, bestowing life. Well, I've not had a chance yet to say to everybody, very happy Pascha to you all. We've got some lovely things here, some of them I really love. There's a child in our church who keeps on making things for me. Here is the chicken. Here we've got an Easter cat. It's probably a prankster. Another way, well, he's wearing loads of jewelry like that. And then here we've got a nice Easter card, which tells us everything we need to know. Christ is risen. Rather surprisingly, there are bunny rabbits coming out of some of the eggs. Well, why not? Reminds me of the time a few years ago when one of the people I worked with told me, he said to me, "There's nothing you can say, Father, at all, that will persuade me that the Easter bunny is real." Well, how do I answer that? That's honestly what he thought Christianity was about. Then, well, perhaps he ought to look into it more. I simply said to him something along the lines, "Well, you'll be interested to know that I don't believe the Easter bunny is real either." What? Call yourself a priest? Oh, goodness me, I don't know. Right. It's a beautiful, and it's going to get hotter. The only slight negative about it is, and it's a very slight negative, is the air is full of pollen, and so my eyes feel a bit like golf balls. Nothing like as bad as they felt. When I went to London the other day, last Saturday, I arrived in London around about 11 o'clock. I left London around about 4 o'clock. It took me until Monday for my poor eyes, nose, ears, throat, everything else to recover from the disgusting pollution there. When I got home, I had a shower, and the soap was grey. How do people live in such a terrible place? Anyway, there we go. Nothing to do with me. Good old-fashioned clean dirt and London do not go together. Horrible. Good morning, good evening. Truly he's risen. Amen. God bless you and keep you. Thank you very much indeed for your comment about my garden the other day. I'm glad you liked it. It's a little bit overwhelming at the moment. I could spend several hours a day in there without any trouble at all, getting it right. And this balance between weeds and flowers you want to plant. I'm a great believer in weeds. If you've only got things that, our sort of flowers, well, slugs, snails, and everything else are going to eat them, aren't they? Whereas we've got nice, tasty, fresh weeds, baby weeds, all over the place, then the slugs, snails, and other things are much more interested in those. So to have a small number of weeds, quite a large number of weeds, but all of them seedlings and regularly hoed in patches. And when you're weeding, not too much weeding in one go, then that makes the slugs and other things, snails, etc., go after them when they're so nice and tasty, rather than the plants that I want to keep for my own benefit. There we go. Chapter 25 of Acts of the Apostles. We're going to read verses 1 to 12. Now, when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him, that they would summon him to Jerusalem while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was going there shortly. Therefore, he said, Let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man, to see if there is any fault in him. And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea. And the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. When he had come, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you well know. For if I am an offender, or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, you have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go. Well, that's going to set in train a whole series of things that are going to keep Paul busy for several years. It's not going to be all that pleasant for him, but the outcome is going to be great. It will mean that he will preach in Rome, the center of the Roman world, and from there, of course, his preaching will be spread to pretty well everywhere in the Roman world. We're pretty sure that at the end of Acts of the Apostles, St. Paul was released, and from there he traveled out through what we're nowadays called Portugal and Spain, and then the western side of France, and then the eastern side of England. None of that is called any of those things back then, of course, until he reached more or less I guess half a mile down the road here, where he preached in Lincoln, decided he had gone quite far enough and turned round and went back towards Rome, where we think he was then executed by having his head cut off. So there we are. Interesting for him. So let's take this bit by bit. So in chunks, verses 1 through 3. Now when Festus had come to the province after 3 days, he went out from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priests and chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him, that he would summon him to Jerusalem, while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. So Festus had just arrived in Palestine, and he has just gone up to Jerusalem, and within 3 days of him arriving in that city for his inauguration, the chief priests and the proti, that means the important people, the protos means first, the first people of the city, bring charges against St. Paul. Now that is really quite interesting. When a new ruler appears, that is the time to bring to that person your most important concerns. So that, for example, when we get a new mayor in the city in a few days, tomorrow, we vote for tomorrow, we get a new mayor, first one we've ever had of that sort. We have traditional mayors, but this one is going to be a sort of mayor with power. Why we really need a mayor with power is beyond me, but there we are. When we get a mayor with power, people come to that mayor with all of their urgent needs, like sewage treatment, traffic problems, water treatment, polluted rivers, potholes, schools and hospitals and all that sort of stuff. And what do they bring to their new guy? they bring St. Paul. So he's top of their agenda. The most interesting thing they have to do is talk about St. Paul. Now, quite interesting. Now, Festus himself was quite an interesting fellow. He only served as the governor of the province for about 2 years. He had been appointed by Nero, who had brought Felix back home because of Felix's incredible mission while he was there. And he arrived in Israel, in Palestine. We're not quite sure when. Nobody really knows when, but somewhere between AD 57 and 59. So let's toss a coin and come down at AD 58. So we're talking about 28 to 30 years after the resurrection, maybe 25 years later. Still something that is a hot topic within Jerusalem. They hate St. Paul. They hate everything to do with Christianity. Okay. That's quite interesting. Well, we'll come on to that in a minute. So there we are. And then the last thing to say about this little area here, verse 3, you'll notice, they want the favor from Festus, not because they want to try St. Paul and do things according to justice, as they are bound to do according to the law of Moses, but they wish to murder St. Paul on the way. So the very people who will promulgate the commandment, thou shalt not murder, wish to murder, are the very ones who are told to bring justice to the people, are the ones who are going to ignore justice. So St. Paul is, this instance here, St. Luke is using to show the apostasy of the Jewish leaders. Okay? Good morning to Bev and to Harry. Christ is risen. God bless you both. Okay, verses 4 and 5 then. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was going there shortly. Okay, therefore, he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man to see if there's any fault in him. It rather looks as if maybe two things. Number one, Festus probably knew very well the Jews intended to murder St. Paul. And he doesn't want his rule to start off with a murder. He wasn't going to be all that fussed about that later on, mind you. But right now, he doesn't want it to happen that way. Secondly, it's probable that he didn't really want to be holed up in Jerusalem any longer than he really needed to be. It was less comfortable than his nice little praetorium down in Caesarea, which was a very comfortable residence indeed. You can go and look for yourself at some of the archaeological digs and finds to find that it was a palatial place with swimming pools and other things next to the sea, cool breezes, fresh fish, barbecues even, and pots of flowers, such as would even delight my own garden. Okay, so why would anybody want to stay in stinking Jerusalem? He was not all that fussed about what the Jews wanted, and later on it became clear that even his rule was going to be cruel, heartless, cold, and so on. Felix and Festus's rule, followed by the ones who came after them, led to the Jewish revolt, or rebellion, revolt, or rebellion, revolt, rebellion in AD 66, which of course ended disastrously, with Jerusalem pretty well being taken apart afterwards. And then in around about AD 35, 36, 37, the Romans, they had the Bar Kokhba revolt as well from San Bar Kokhba, and that resulted in the complete almost complete removal of somebody's cutting the grass, probably Philip. And we've got a fundi out here as well, who's mending the fire alarms. So that explains all the noise going on. So the Bar Kokhba revolt resulted in all the men being taken as slaves or crucified. Jerusalem, much the same happened. Jerusalem itself was uninhabitable, and there's a huge replacement of population there in order to take away the whole idea of Jews and the land in that particular place. Anyway, he invites them to send a delegation down to the much more comfortable Caesarea. Verses 6 through 8. And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea. And the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. When he had come, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. Right. Isn't that interesting? St. Luke paints us a picture that shows that the trial of St. Paul before Festus is just like the trial of the Lord before Pontius Pilate. There's nothing but what the Lord was accused of, so St. Paul is also accused of quarter of a century later. That is, of course, and also, of course, that none of these things, like against the Lord, nothing could be proved. Okay? So what were they? Number one, that he was not keeping the law. One of the things, of course, they accused the Lord of. The Lord said he was the law. And when they hated the fact that he would work, apparently, on the Sabbath by healing people or by feeding hungry folk. They said he spoke against the temple. They did the same about the Lord. The Lord had said, destroy this temple, pointing at himself, and they misunderstood that as the temple in Jerusalem. Well, the temple in Jerusalem was going to be destroyed, but they were destroying what the temple represented, that is, the Lord himself. And then finally, that here is a rival to Caesar. They're saying that St. Paul is speaking against Caesar, and the Lord was a king like Caesar. And you remember the Jewish leaders shouting out, we have no king but Caesar, which is apostasy, for the king of the Jews is God. That's why the appellation above the cross, the King of the Jews, is so important. Okay, the King of Glory, the King of the Jews. So those are the things they said against St. Paul, and they are a direct mirror of what they had said against the Lord quarter of a century before. But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, verse 9, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? Festus is now willing to give Paul over to the Jews, to hand him over, just as Pilate handed over the Lord to the Jews as well. Pilate, as you remember, washed his hands of this innocent man and said, you go crucify him then. And then he was crucified. Now, Festus would have known full well that the Jews would not stop at anything other than killing Paul, and they'd kill him either on the way to or from Jerusalem. That is really what they wanted, and they wouldn't care how they got it. And there'd be people willing to martyr themselves, just as there are people willing to martyr themselves nowadays by killing other people. You remember the Taliban? The Taliban blew up with the view of killing a minister from the non-Taliban government. They blew up 76 children in the little town of Baghlan in Afghanistan, where I grew up. And the chap himself blew himself up. He martyred himself to kill a minister, and he martyred lots of children at the same time. And these are the people who now run Afghanistan. So pray for the poor Afghans. So Festus would know very well indeed that the murder was on the cards, as indeed did St. Paul. So the question that he asks, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem, is an empty one. Okay? He's trying to find fault in St. Paul, accuse him of being difficult, obstreperous, and so on. But from Festus's point of view, if he went up to Jerusalem, got murdered on the way, that's one less problem to worry about. Done. Finished. Forget it. Have a nice day, everybody. Oh dear, what a pity. He got murdered on the way. Okay? So, as far as he is concerned, if Paul got murdered, hooray! That's the end of that. Verse 10 and 11. So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat, not the Jewish one, where I ought to be judged. To the Jews I have done no wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. So St. Paul points out Festus knows he's done nothing wrong to the Jews. So all of the Jewish complaints against him are meaningless. They can't even prove them. From time to time, people come tell me things about, I'm chairman of the ecclesiastical court in such diocese, come and accuse somebody of something. If they've got no proof, there's no witnesses, there's nothing other than hearsay, there's nothing that can be done. You might think, well, if that was true, that's a terrible thing. But without somebody actually coming and saying, on this, that way, in front of these witnesses, this happened, then where can you go? And just ordinary justice demands that. And the Jewish leaders could not do those four things. They're going to say, on this day, he said this in front of these people and wrote this down. There's no witnesses, nothing to do, and that's the end of it. Nothing to look at here. So Paul is saying to Festus now, so now you have to decide, Festus, is there any Roman law that I have broken? Remembering that St. Paul has been there for quite a long time, wandering around but kept within the palace grounds, under light guard, with people coming and going to visit him. He himself has said, okay, this boil must be lanced. I cannot stay here forever and ever and ever. Something must be done. So Paul is saying to Festus, if there is any crime, it must be a crime against Rome. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to have me put to death? Or are you going to let me go? Those are your choices, and on your head may it be. And he says, even, if I have done something worthy of death, then crack on. I deserve to be executed, then execute me. He's putting down his trump cards, really. And finally, he puts down the main trump card, which is, well, if you can't sort it out, then Caesar can. And maybe here he overplayed his hand. I used to play a little bridge at one point, so that's why I'm talking about cards. So I'm a Roman citizen, he's saying, therefore, at this Roman court, if you can't sort it out, then I appeal to a higher court. I appeal to Caesar's court, and let Caesar try him. Now, as a Roman citizen, St. Paul had that right. It would be tried under Caesar, probably not in front of Caesar himself, who had other things to attend to, like eating grapes and getting drunk and burning the city down and playing the violin and doing all sorts of other stuff like this. If you go and look up the life of Nero, you'll find that, he got up to all sorts of nonsense, including burning Christians for sport, having blamed them for the fire in Rome. Verse 12. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, "You have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go." Well, that in many ways, not in every way, but in many ways, solves Festus's problem. He has a problem with the Jews. He has a problem with this guy who's eating his food and sticking around in the palace and making a menace of himself in front of the Jews. He can't keep him there forever. He can't let him go because he'll get murdered. He can't really send him back to Jerusalem because what Paul has said is true. He is a Roman. He has been hanging around an awful long time. It is actually up to Festus to solve the problem. So Festus temporizes. He doesn't let him go. He doesn't have a final judgment on Paul. He says, okay, you want to go to Rome? Off to Rome you'll go then. And now he's got a problem. And we'll find this problem out tomorrow when we have another look, because Festus is sort of scratching his head and playing with his ears, wondering, well, what can I write to Caesar about this man? He hasn't done anything wrong. Him of Jewish hatred. The Jews can't find anything he's done wrong, neither can I. I can't just write and say, "My dear Caesar, this man is a blinking pest. Let him go." Okay, so he's got to find something or other, and we'll find out what he tries to do tomorrow about this. He's got to send him to Rome, by the way, because now Paul has actually done this. But on the other hand, he has to see the back of Paul. Paul will be out of his hair, number one. Paul will be away from the Jews. And so the Jews are not going to be bothering him anymore about St. Paul. But he does have this problem. What on earth is he going to say to Nero? There we are. That's enough of that for one day. Please keep in your prayers the following: Nicholas and Andreas. I think before Pascha, I said both of these two are very poorly. Nicholas has now died, and so has his brother Andreas. In fact, Andreas died first, and then Nicholas died shortly afterwards. So please pray for the rest of their family, especially for Gabby, Nicholas and Andreas' sister, who's had a double loss of her two brothers, which is obviously a very painful thing to happen to anybody. Christ is risen. Let's pray also for Nicoletta and for Nicoletta, for Daniel, who apparently continues to improve, for Hilary, who is still having treatment against cancer, for Joseph and for Simon, for Carol, for Georgia, and for Jane. Jane is also having treatment for cancer. Remember to pray for each other, and God willing, see you tomorrow. We had a wonderful Holy Week and Pascha here, made even more beautiful and lovely by having one of our tenors here staying in the parish, Christina, which was wonderful fun and gave me the opportunity to see all sorts of things around Lincoln that I haven't visited for a very long time. Things like the local castle, the local Anglican cathedral, walk around Lincoln itself. I went to see the walloping great tree. It's called the Major Oak in the middle of Sherwood Forest. Everybody knows it as the place where Robin Hood of fame hid from the Sheriff of Nottingham. It was magnificent oak in a stand of oaks that are also magnificent. This oak is about 1,000 years old, so it's a real beauty. It's only, it's quite a youngster in comparison with some cedars of Lebanon, or even, of course, we have yew trees that are much older than that in this country, 2,000 to 3,000 years old. But as an oak tree, it is an absolutely magnificent thing. In some ways, I wonder whether they're doing the right thing to it. It's the whole propping it up all over. Maybe, trees expect their branches to fall off, and they then regrow new ones. And this is one of the ways they stay healthy and stay younger. But by stopping the branches falling off, no new ones will grow. And I did notice how little interstitial growth there was. So I don't know, it takes several hundred years for it to die of this, but maybe in a couple of hundred years to look back and think, that Father Philip was right, so we just left it alone. There we are. Right. Well, God bless you and keep you. Christ is risen. And this tomorrow. If you like this, please put a thumbs up. If you didn't, put a thumbs down. Both of these two things are very good indeed for our statistics. Righto, God bless you and keep you. Bye-bye then.